Hi, this is Anima Mundi part 14 for EA Zoom, Michaela Villiers-Kendall. It's the 8th of December, 2022, and it's a full moon. Don't we know it? Okay, so this is the terrible mother. Last time, we actually had some very useful information that came out of the rulerships of Horus and Set, discussing the dark portal. It was the descent. So we talked about the descendant, and we talked about the inner sun, the new moon, which is on the descendant, and this is in the wheel of the zodiac. So, and this is the Egyptian, if you hadn't seen the part before, this is the Egyptian wheel of the zodiac, the ancient Egyptian Hermetic wheel. So what comes up now is the terrible mother, because, you know, going by the film to The Shining, we're still in room 237, and the terrible mother is the hag that comes out of the bath. But the hag that comes out of the bath, and actually I'll just quickly go down to that. I'll just switch to that quickly. Of 237 is, as we found out, is also the hermaphrodite. So the hermaphrodite is the alchemical union, the wedding of the sun and the moon in alchemy. So as Carl Jung says on here, the autonomy of the collective unconscious expresses itself in the figures of anima and animus. So the alchemical wedding is actually the wedding of Sol Luna, of the sun and the moon. And in the ancient Egyptian Hermeticism, alchemy, which alchemy comes from Egypt, it is the sun and the moon combined, and that is actually expressed in the new moon, the conjunction of the sun and the moon. That's what that alchemical phrase always meant. So if you put that onto the wheel of the zodiac, at the descendant of the wheel, of the annual wheel and the great wheel, it's complicated, but, you know, that's why I'm trying to simplify it, and I'll try to do that in discussing the terrible mother, because it is a very complicated subject, but it's actually beautifully simple. And that was what the ancient Hermetics did. They actually took mythology and they expressed it in myth in order to simplify very complicated concepts and very deep concepts. And that's what Carl Jung, we've got Carl Jung's quote on there, that's what Carl Jung realized about the ancient Egyptian Gnostic Hermetical teachings. He realized that this was expressed wheels, literally wheels within wheels, from the daily wheel to the diurnal wheel to the annual wheel, and right out to the great wheel, which is the great year. And the great year is the precessional sun. And they took everything from the precessional sun, and then they took that down. So it goes from the wide angle, the wide perspective, down to in time. So you've got 26,000 years, and I'll show that in a minute. I'll go to that actually. All right. Okay. So this is the great year of the zodiac. The upper half of the horizon is ruled by the sun. The lower half, below the horizon, is ruled by the moon. And that's the basics. That's the basics of alchemy and of astrology and everything else. That's where it starts. And that's what you have to bear in mind. The upper half belongs to the sun. The lower half belongs to the moon. And that's pretty obvious in the annual wheel and the diurnal, the daily wheel as the sun goes round, which we know it doesn't go round, but it's because it's geocentric. It seems to go round the zodiac. But in actual fact, it's not only geocentric, it's centered on the man or woman, on mankind as the individual, in fact. So you've got the individual, the heart of the great year, just like at the heart of the annual wheel. And you've also got the individual at the heart of the great year, which takes circa 26,000 years to complete, from the ascendant to right round, obviously back to the ascendant. So if you split that in half, you've got 13,000 years ruled by the sun, and you've got 13,000 years, 12,800, but 13,000 years basically ruled by the moon. And so it's beautifully simplified in, yes, this is the year, this is the day, this is the hour, this is right out to 26,000 years, the great year of the great wheel of the zodiac. So last time we went into the myth of Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, the great ancient Egyptian myth that is the basis, because Horus is the hero, but Osiris is the great father. So they are one, really. So you have the great father, who is Osiris, and you have Horus, who is the sun, but they are the same. It's just the sun rising is Horus. And so as the sun rises, he is always Horus. After that, as he descends, he's Osiris. It seems complicated, but it's actually, as I said, it's beautifully simple. So in the film, The Shining, we just saw that Osiris is on the green bed, which is Hauran on the green bed. And that, as I said in the last part, is the same as in the 2001 A Space Odyssey. And they are obviously twin films. They actually complement each other, because the Space Odyssey is out of Earth. Obviously, it's the cosmos in relation to the Earth, and The Shining is the perspective of the Earth coming out to the cosmos. Kubrick had a wonderful mind, his great cinema graphic mind of the beauty of perspective. That's his films are all about perspective, of the story's perspective, but also he used the camera to demonstrate it. So it's all brilliant. It's just a challenge to obviously describe what was done, but that's what I'm trying to do. So anyway, getting back to this, we have the great year, and what Osiris, Isis. Osiris is the great father, the sun. Isis stands for the great mother, the moon. Horus is the son of Osiris and Isis, and Set is the paternity, is the fourth figure in this. Set is the protagonist. He's the antagonist, he's the antagonist. So, but he's the uncle. So he's also the brother of Osiris and Isis. That's actually what Hamlet, the great, dare I say it, Francis Bacon play, Shakespeare, but Francis Bacon wrote. And that's what Hamlet's Mill, which is what Kubrick used as the mainstay of the fugue that he wrote underneath The Shining, which is all about the myth of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set. Basically, it's about procession, And basically, it's about their whole system of astrology, in fact, and linking the microcosm to the macrocosm, to as above, as below. It's a pretty big thing for him to take on, and it turns out it's a pretty big thing for me to take on too, but I'm giving it a shot. So anyway, but it's fascinating. So anyway, here we go. We've got the great year, and what that tells us is that Osiris is obviously, as the sun, he rules Leo. So in order to go further with this and establish about the terrible mother and the terrible father, the great mother and the great father, we have to know what the ascendant of the great year is. And that's not easy, because obviously that goes way, way back in history. In fact, it's interesting now, Graham Hancock has just come out with the Ancient Apocalypse series on Netflix. And it's fascinating, but he's getting a lot of flack because he's actually he's taken the bull by the horns, so to speak, and he's challenging the scientists about the ages and how far back they go. But he's doing it splendidly, and it's a wonderful series. So this sort of goes into that, and as astrologers, it's pretty. Actually, it's good for us to explore it from astrology, because then we can be a step ahead of what he's saying, because we need to be, because we should be as astrologers. So I'm learning as I go along. Anyway, so Osiris is the great father, and he rules Leo, obviously, because Leo is ruled by the sun. So you've got opposite him, you've got Aquarius, which is the moon. So that is the full moon. And when it gets around to this descendant, as we said last time, that's the new moon. So you've got the great year, the great wheel, divided by the ascendant, and then it goes to the midheaven, and then it goes to the descendant, and that's the cardinal grand cross, and it goes down to the IC, the nadir, and the zenith at the top, the midheaven. So now we know who rules those. We know we've got Osiris as the great father. We've got Isis as the great mother, the moon, the sun. And because of the fixed stars, and they so cleverly did this, they made Set rule Taurus, because his star is Aldebaran. So Aldebaran is opposite Antares, which is the star of Scorpio. So you have Horus ruling Scorpio, and you have Set ruling Taurus. So there you go. You've got the fixed grand cross, and the fixed grand cross is the cross of the great year, as according to the Hermetics. And that's because the sun and the moon rule it. And also with Set, you have Venus ruling Taurus, but also Saturn rules the midheaven. Saturn and Set is associated with Satan, in fact, as it sort of became, because he is the antagonist. Ruling time, and obviously the great year is all about time. Set as the antagonist is the destroyer. So that's where he takes his axe. That's where the myth of the Minotaur and the myth of the murder of Osiris, which is central to the great year, and it's central to Kubrick's story, to the Fugue. So it's about Set. Jack becomes Set. I'm sure everyone's guessed that. Certainly when we get to room 237, it's Set. It's the Minotaur. It's the ruler of Taurus. He obviously knew inside out his mythology, and had got way ahead of a lot of people in the meanings. Probably went further in them, because as I say, I've learned things I never learned from anywhere else, just by following his film. So we know that it's the fixed Grand Cross. That makes a lot of sense. That doesn't mean that 13,000 years ago, and that's when the age of Leo began, and I'll just go to the Sphinx, actually. Hold on. That's when the age of Leo began, 13,000 years ago, 12,800. But that doesn't mean civilization. Hermetic civilization actually began then. It probably went back a lot further, and then we had the Atlantis myth, which I won't go into now, but Graham Hancock brings that up as well, about a very ancient civilization. And obviously all of this has come from a very sophisticated civilization, handed down for thousands and thousands of years, way more than was suspected. It's sort of all coming out now. So this is the Great Sphinx. That's a great picture with the full moon behind it. The thing is, they suspect, and there's a wonderful book, there's loads of wonderful books, but there's a book called The Giza Prophecy by Scott Creighton and Gary Osborne. And actually the foreword is by Graham Hancock. And it's about the Orion Code and the secret teachings of the pyramids. And I really recommend that because it goes into the basis of the great year and how it was all encoded in the pyramids through mathematics and everything else. And they've done a great job of unearthing this. Obviously, Graham Hancock knows about this because it comes out with some amazing revelations. And he hasn't got to that yet, but I just wonder if he will. But if not, if he does, he's going to get even in more trouble, I'm sure, but never mind, who cares? We don't care as astrologers, we love it. It's brilliant. So anyway, they think that there were two great Sphinx, and the one remaining obviously has the head of a man, woman, mankind, and which is thought to be Aquarius. So it's the sign of man, which is Aquarius, which, paradoxically is ruled by Isis. So it could be Isis, actually. And the body of a lion. But they think there were two, because it doesn't make sense. You just have one, because what they were indicating, and they think the Sphinxes, both these Sphinxes that existed, the one remaining and the one that's lost, the one that's lost obviously would have had the head of a lion, which would have been the goddess Sekhmet, she had a dual, she was the terrible mother as well, and she also had her great mother side, which was Bastet, but she was the great lion goddess. And so the other Sphinx would have had the head of a lion and the body of a woman. So they oppose each other. And it makes sense. The one with the head of the lion would be symbolizing the age of Leo and the ascendant, whereas the Sphinx with the body of the lion and the head of a woman, I'll say then, which would be Isis, ruled by the moon, the ruler of the moon, she would be on the descendant. So 13,000 years ago, the age of Leo rose. But they think that although both Sphinxes were built in the age of Leo, as I said, probably the civilizations, although they had been broken up by, in fact, just before the age of Leo took off was the age of Virgo, and that would have been where there was some sort of huge catastrophe. It's a bit of a pun, but anyway, which would have resulted in the Younger Dais, as Graham Hancock talks about in the series, the Ancient Apocalypse. And so that catastrophe destroyed the civilization, and then it was rebuilt. It was resurrected, in other words, like Osiris, in the age of Leo, 13,000 years ago, and that's when they built the Sphinx. They say the pyramids were built probably before the age of Taurus, so actually later, in fact, much later, 6,500 years later about. And so the pyramids were recording what happened before. So, and the Sphinx, obviously, one of them remained to record that. In fact, there are marks. It's fascinating, and it tells you in this book and some other books, in fact, by these same authors. They're brilliant. And there's Robert Bauval as well, who's very good, who wrote with Graham Hancock. And they describe how there's watermarks and on the Sphinx that prove that it was in a great flood. So they think it went back, as I say, to the Ice Age, to just after the Ice Age, because it was built to build a new civilization. So anyway, out of that we get the Great Wheel, and I'll go on from that. Hold on. That's a great year. That's the age of Leo. So I had to use, a wheel. So take no notice of the Roman numerals, because obviously that's because that's to do with the annual year, the wheel of the zodiac. But the Great Wheel, because it goes clockwise, actually makes it look slightly different, because you've got Leo and the ascendant there. So ignore the Roman numerals in the center. So Leo, Cancer, Gemini. So although an age is a sign, and each age is about 2,150 years, I think, or 160, just over 2,000 years. So each quarter takes up about 6,500 years. So each of those quarters is ruled by the four figures, which is Osiris, Horus, Isis, Set, and Horus is at the IC. So Horus, because Scorpio is at the high C, because we've got the ascendant of the Great Wheel, so we know that Horus and Scorpio rule the IC, and Set rules the midheaven. So that gives us the blueprint of the chart, in fact. So these are the ages of the Great Father, from Leo to the end of Gemini. And that is the golden age. So the golden age of the Great Father. And that's where that makes sense, that because it's slightly confusing when we're told through myth that at the end of the golden age, Saturn Kronos, the ruler, broke bad. he run amok. He became a bad ruler all of a sudden. Well, that's because the golden age ended then. That's because the Great Father's rule ended then. And at the end, it was actually at the end of the mutable age, because it's at the end of each mutable age that the rule ends. It's at the start of the fixed age that the new rulership comes in, and the new civilization under the new rulership begins. At each of these junctures, and I won't go deeply into that right now because I'll sort of save that for later, but there seems to be a catastrophe. There's a catastrophe outside. Just one just cried. I don't know. I'll ignore that. A catastrophe, like the Great Flood. And that's why Kubrick uses the blood elevator. That's one thing. He's demonstrating the Great Flood, but it wasn't just one Great Flood, because it seems to happen every 6,500 years, particularly after 13,000 years. So the age of Virgo was a great catastrophe. I'll just finish what that says there. So this is the full moon that you get at the start of Leo. And that quarter is from the full moon to the last quarter moon, which rules the midheaven, which would be the start of the age of Taurus. So I lost my, okay. Can't see my, oh, okay. Okay, they're down here now. Right. Okay. Okay, so after the age of Leo, it goes up to the age of Taurus, like I just said, and it's from the age of Taurus then to the age of Aquarius. Now, as I said, what happened was at the end of age of Gemini, which is shown in the film, the dead twins scene, there was a great catastrophe, a great flood. Whatever it was may have destroyed Atlantis then, or it might have been before the end of, but it might have been during the age of Virgo, in fact. It's not quite sure about that because obviously it's very great spans of time. But anyway, there was a very great flood at the start of Leo, before the start of Leo, the age of Virgo. And then there was another great flood at the end of Gemini. And that's the one that Kubrick chose as the end of Gemini, because that's what Plato said. That was the timing that he said. And besides, I doubt they even knew then that, you know, civilization, they didn't definitely know civilization went back any further. He took that from myth. Plato handed it down from mythology. But now, because we have scientists like Robert Bauval and Gary Osborne and Scott Creighton, and reporters like Graham Hancock, we can actually start to uncover all of this and find out the timescale. So the ruler went bad at the end of the age of Gemini, because Saturn, also being the ruler of time, he's also the great father. He's really part. So it's like Sun, Saturn. I mean, Saturn is always part of it. He is the Lord of time. It's just when he gets to Set, and Set rules these disasters, really. Set is the instigator of chaos. Now, and he takes his axe at that point, and he kills, murders the age before. Each age, every age, but particularly at these junctures of the mutable ages before the next fixed age. It also explains, I won't get into that, but it also explains why the book of Revelation, you know, it's the four living beasts, creatures. It's the four beasts of Revelation. And yeah, so that's why these four creatures are so important. And that's why they're in the manager's office of the Overlook Hotel at the start, because they are the cross, but also they're showing something very deep about, now this is where it gets even deeper, because it's not just about nature's chaos happening, which is mythology, which is put into metaphorically by Set and Saturn, destroying each age and then rebirthing into the next one, resurrecting. They tie everything, as I said, to the individual who is at the center, who is the consciousness at the center of both wheels, the great wheel and the individual, the yearly wheel of the zodiac. So it is man's consciousness that actually is connected to nature and to chaos. And that's why you get the raising of the, and I'll just put that on actually. Oh, it's down here now. Okay. It's harder to see down here, but never mind. Let me go to that first. No, I'll go back to that. It's hard to see down there, but I'll get to it in a minute. So I'm going to put back the games room in The Shining, because he talks about the bullseye. There's a dartboard there, and that's sort of the hub of the story, because it's saying that centroversion is called in depth psychology or analytical psychology, centroversion, the term. And centroversion, as it says here, the best example of centroversion and its symbolism is to be found in ancient Egypt, in the cults and myths that cluster around the figure of Osiris. Osiris is a many-sided figure, but in his most original form, he is unquestionably a fertility god. The bloody dismemberment of the king guaranteed for the earth's fertility, and also it's to do with the cycles as the moon, as we discussed. The generation of Osiris through Isis brings this stage of centroversion. And when I get to that, I'll have to go through the other ones first because it's down here on my keyboard, the slides. So centroversion is what Kubrick's saying about the games room. It's the dartboard, it's the bullseye, it's the center. Okay, so the individual's consciousness, and this is why it's very hard to get hold of, but we do realize that now, but they spell it out, they say it very beautifully, is at the center of the ages. So the reason that you have the terrible mother and the great mother, you have the terrible father and the great father, and as I was saying, they rule each quarter. So you get the great father at the start of Leo, you go up to the terrible father, the great father at the start of Leo, the terrible mother, I'll get this, okay. Yeah, okay, because the moon rules the lower half, the sun rules the upper half. The terrible father and the great father. So the great father rules Leo to the midheaven. That's when he becomes the terrible father. And that's when Saturn breaks bad, because that's set then. So he is then Saturn Chronos. He has reached the time of the cataclysm. The chaos is unleashed. And at that point, he becomes the terrible father. Consciousness, the Jed column falls. The Jed column is the axis. The Jed column is the meridian and the pole, and it's also the spine of the man, as I said in the last part. And so when it falls, that's the mankind's consciousness falling. And so at this point, it falls. Why? Because the sun has reached its height, the precessional sun, and it's falling. It's going to fall then. Well, they linked this into nature, and what they've encoded in the pyramids, the Great Pyramid, because they've lined it up mathematically with the fixed stars and the constellations, obviously, and the axis. And so the pole star, using the pole star. The pole star back then was like, I haven't got my pole stars lined up. But yeah, I'll have to go back to that, because I've forgotten whether it wasn't Polaris, that's coming up. Vega? Yeah, it could have been Vega. Okay, but anyway, the pole star, the axis, they're all one. What they said encoded in the pyramids was at that point when that there is a cycle. Now the cycles are intimately linked in, connected to consciousness, they said. And so like the sun and the moon, the cycles of the sun and the moon, that's how we do astrology. That's how we've learned astrology, because the cycles of the sun and moon are linked in with us. Well, they're also linked in, obviously, with the great year. And so what they tell us, linked in with a great year, is that at that point, the sun falls and so does the axis. They say, and that's why they have this 23 degrees axis thing that goes through the Freemasonry, because that's something that hasn't been shared, that the axis moves. So the axis should be, metaphorically, it should be straight up, like the Jed column. It is the Jed column, and it should be straight. And that's the upright consciousness. That's Osiris, because he is the axis So complicated. But he's the axis, and he should be straight up. But because of man's consciousness, our fall somehow, we don't have an axis that's straight up. It's at 23 degrees or thereabouts, just after now. And so it tilts. Well, they say that at these junctures, every 13,000 years, but split actually into 6,500 years, at these fixed stages, the fixed grand cross, it tilts more. And it describes this in the Giza prophecy, that actually it, at this tilt, then that is when you get catastrophe. You get great flood. Civilization, it does adjust itself, it comes back again, but obviously nature has, which they call the terrible mother, the moon, nature, the cycles, has created chaos, Eris, the goddess. So Greek mythology took it did its version of the same myth, the same basis, the same message. So Eris, the goddess of chaos, then, with her yellow ball, which is a yellow apple, which is the yellow ball that rolls towards Danny. It's chaos, but it's to do with the cycles. So anyway, so Saturn breaks bad, and that's Set, and he becomes Set. And that goes into the mythology of, that's why we get Saturn eating his children as well. Because that's Kronos going bad. But he's actually become Set. If that makes sense. Anyway, let's go on. Let's go on with the slide. Which way is this? I think it's that way. Okay, so this is the Dendrozodiac. So at the heart of the Dendrozodiac, which I did bring up before, but you can see there's a hippopotamus, which is all of, it's about the balance. And balance is at the heart of this, because it's the scales, and that's why you get Aries, Libra, and the seasons are all lined up with Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, solstices, because it's about the scales and the balance in the annual year. And they balance consciousness as well. That's the laws of Mat, and the 42 laws that say it's not just about balancing the heart, because if actually balancing the heart against the feather of Mat is about balancing the consciousness, and it's also about raising the Jed. It's also about the axis being straight, and so everything would be balanced. In fact, there would be no precession if it wasn't for the tipped pole. Amazing they knew about all this. I said that before, but it's incredible. But it's also about the consciousness. So that's why to adhere to these laws and elevate one's consciousness. But all of this, in order to avert chaos, because it's like a kind of curse, as they put it, that we have this chaos, but we're cursed by the terrible mother, because nature then takes it out on us because our consciousness is not raised. So that's why we must raise the Jed column. In the center of that is the bull's leg. It's hard to tell what it is, but that red bit in the middle, that's by the fox, and that's in the constellation. The bull's leg actually stands for Taurus, and the pole star was next to Taurus. Well, because the pole star was there, obviously that's Taurus. They made the midheaven Taurus, as they did Set as the ruler. Horus is the rule of Scorpio, because it went through Scorpio, Taurus and Scorpio. So you've got the bull's leg, which is the axis. So it's the bull's leg that Set uses at the beginning of the age of Taurus, or as it's coming in, to kill the age of Gemini, to kill the great father's golden age since Leo. So he beats him to death, but then he puts him in a coffin, sarcophagus. He puts him into the water, which is the primordial waters, but it's the Nile, and he's drowned. But he's not only just drowned, he's cut into bits, and we talked about that, the 14 parts. The phallus can't be found, but that's because the phallus is also the axis, and so it's symbolizing that the phallus, now this is where suddenly the Saturn myth makes sense about Saturn eating his children, but also before he does that, he castrates his father, Uranus, so he won't be usurped. And the castration takes place, and then the genitals in the Greek myth is thrown into the ocean, and that becomes Aphrodite. So Aphrodite raises from the ocean, from the severed genitals. Well, that's because the metaphor of the severed genitals is the lower masculine. So it symbolizes the lower masculine being removed, and that enables the higher masculine, the great father, to raise the Jed in consciousness. It's metaphoric. It was never meant to be anything else, but that's why you get that connection. And that's why Venus, Aphrodite, the hermaphrodite, because the Greek myth was taking it from the Egyptian myth, raises from the ocean. She rises. And that's also to do with the myth of Medusa. I'll see if I can get further than this, actually. We'll go on to the myth of Medusa next, but this is so the age of Taurus is the terrible father, the age of the terrible father, the patriarchy. So there's a good, there's a great patriarchy and there's a terrible patriarchy. And I've skipped Taurus, haven't I? No, it was on the last one. Okay, so the terrible patriarchy, the terrible father reigns that quarter from the first quarter moon to the new moon, 3 signs from Taurus to Aquarius. And so that's set. He's the terrible father. It's the terrible patriarchy. And in that time, the Jed is lowered. The consciousness is lowered in that time. It's tilted. And the aim is to get it back again. But obviously that's very difficult in the age of the terrible father. We are actually in the patriarchy. We're at the end of that now, thank goodness. So we're at the end of there's been a lot of talk about the patriarchy, but that's the basis of that concept, that we are actually at the end of the terrible father, the patriarchate that is unconscious. And we're going to come into Aquarius, and the Aquarius will be the start of, as it says then, Aquarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, the ages of the Great Mother. So it's the Great Mother, like it was the Great Father before in Leo, now it's the Great Mother, ruled by Isis. So that's the star of the tarot, as I've said before. The water bearer. Sirius is her star. So it's a great age. It's a raising of consciousness. But first we have to go to the end of Age of Pisces, and obviously that's the tilt of the axis. Now, when they talk about chaos, it's not just about chaos of Mother Nature, which is the terrible mother, but it's also the chaos that man, and obviously they say man causes that by not being disconnected from nature and his own consciousness, his higher nature. But it is also man-made catastrophes like wars. And so you get very great wars, like, you got the age of Aries, Taurus, it was bloodthirsty. You got the age of Aries, empire building, the Roman Empire, all those empires. And then you get the age of Pisces, which is then it's a whole different ball game. Well, it's not different, but it's the Christian age, but unfortunately that was misused as well. So you can see that it should have been good, but it was hijacked. And it was just another guise of the terrible father. Satan, really, pretending to be Set. It's all down to Set again. Set, by the way, is the henchman of Isis, of the moon, in fact. Set, actually, Saturn and the moon go together with that. So although Set is the antagonist, he's also the henchman of the moon. So he's the henchman of the terrible mother, of the moon in the terrible mother guise. So when he murders Osiris, it's at the descendant, which is Isis. So Isis, the moon, the great mother, pieces. That's when she pieces Osiris back together again, and then you have you could call it the silver age of the great moon. So it is the new matriarchal age, and it's about time. I'll say it again. Excuse me. So anyway, so in the myth, of course, she pieces him together at the IC. He is resurrected. So he's in the annual year, there's a pause. There's the pause of the 3 days at the winter solstice. Well, they're sort of saying that goes for the great year too, because that trickles down from the great wheel, that Osiris is dead at that point, but then he resurrects. The sun at midnight then goes upwards, and Isis is resurrected. But he, at the horizon, he becomes Horus. So he is resurrected, but he is as the sun father then, and he's going upwards. And of course, Horus rules rules Scorpio. So that shows why at the darkest hour it is Horus who is the conscious sun, and consciousness then raises. But of course, at the end of Sagittarius, there is some catastrophe there again before that happens, although not as big as the ones at Leo and Aquarius. At the end of of Gemini and what's the other one? Yeah, Gemini, Sagittarius. Can someone tell me what the other ones are? Yeah, it's Pisces. God's sakes, we're in it. At the end of Pisces. So anyway, so at the end of Sagittarius, so that's where you get the myth of the centaur that was later, again, taken on by the Greek mythology. The centaur uses the same sort of it's the same sort of myth. It's animalistic and the higher, as we know, it's the beast and the animal side of mankind, which is the lower nature, which is the lower consciousness, and then it's the higher, which is the man half, and that's the centaur. So the Greeks very cleverly took the Egyptian Hermetic myths and they converted them to theirs, but they kept the same meaning, and they kept it all alive like that. And actually, in some respects, they took it on another level they wanted to, but not greater, but just on another level. So then you get the centaurs. In fact, I won't get time this time, but next time I want to do this in 2 halves and discuss the centaurs in the other half of the terrible mother, because they very well describe the individual. We're talking here of the collective unconscious and the great year, which trickles down, which obviously is influenced too by the individual. But then you come down to the individual consciousness, and the Greeks were probably more interested in that and about the psychology of the individual. And they use the centaurs to demonstrate that. Centaurs really coming out of the age of Sagittarius, which is why they're associated with Sagittarius, and then going into Scorpio, which obviously, again, that's when consciousness lowers, and that's when you get, we'll go into it next time, but the myth of Hercules, who causes the wine to be spilled, the wine of Dionysus. And Dionysus is another version of Horus, another version of Osiris. And also Dionysus really is like the hermaphrodite. He is androgynous, so he combines Isis probably as well. Dionysus is their great god who combined the two sides of the lower and the higher nature. The terrible mother and the terrible father, the great father and the great mother. So, okay, so as it says there, from descendant to IC, new moon to first quarter moon. So then it goes up. So at that after midnight, the sun goes up. But that is, as the moon then is, the moon is going to lose out to the sun at that point, obviously, because the sun is on the way up. The moon then becomes the terrible mother. The age becomes a terrible mother. Although, even though Horus rules Scorpio, it's Isis actually becomes the terrible mother. And that's it again, why that's hard to understand. Why does she's done really well. She's pieced Osiris back together again. So why does she suddenly become the terrible mother? Well, they explain it that Set has reminded her that he is the henchman of the matriarchy, that she has to be true to the matriarchy, and so she defends Set. She defends his actions against Horus. She actually takes Set's part against Horus, who is, the ruler of Scorpio, the IC. And at that point, Horus then horrifically beheads Isis. And you think, what happened there? The son's just beheaded the mother. But that's because, like the castration, beheading, metaphorically, is seen as, in the moon's case, in the mother's case, is the feminine, archetype, principle, it's the right brain. I was going to say that's the Dionysian brain, as opposed to the Apollonian brain of the left brain. So when the right brain has two sides to it, and one is the terrible mother, one is the great mother, just like the left brain has the great father, terrible father. So she becomes the terrible mother, and she goes against Horus, but in order to elevate her, he beheads her. Well, that's, as I say, that the beheading actually releases the higher consciousness again. It releases the spiritual. And at that point when she is beheaded, she then raises, and he actually replaces, now this is, if I can get to it. Okay. See if I've got the right one. It's very hard to see here. Okay, yeah, I got to it. So Horus replaces her head with a cow's head. And that's right. Look, I have my Minoan bull. You can't see it because I'm not showing, but I have a Minoan bull here. Maybe you can see it at the end. Oh, you can see it. Okay, that's a replica I got in Crete at the museum there of Knossos, and I believe that actually, is actually the head of Hathor. Hathor is the bull goddess, the cow goddess, the cow goddess, who is actually Isis, And she's made the good mother again. She's made the great mother again. She's no longer the terrible mother of that quarter, which is the lower, the other side of the moon, which is from Scorpio to Virgo. And she is then Hathor, the cow goddess. And that's why that picture of the cow and the full moon down there, that's the picture that was in the apartment, the Boulder apartment at the start of the film of The Shining. And he's got that. That's a Colville painting of the cow with a full moon. And that's why he's got it there, because obviously he's saying, that Wendy is Hathor at that point, the cow goddess. She's Isis, but she's become the good Isis again. She's become the great mother because her head has been replaced by the cow. And she is also the Eye of Ra, because she now avenges the sun. She's now on the side of the sun again and of Horus. So now she is going to avenge Ra. She's going to avenge the sun. She's also Venus, because Venus is also closely, that's like Saturn is combined with the sun, Venus is combined with the moon. So she is the Eye of Ra, she's Aphrodite, she's risen again, she is now the consort of Horus, who is the ruler, Horus Osiris, who's the ruler of Leo, and that becomes the Golden Age, and that's the patriarchy, the great father. So she is now a great mother again. She's the great cow mother. There's an interesting thing, though, as she becomes the cow mother, there is a festival that happens, and there's a story about the festival where she actually has, and that's where the wine and beer thing comes in. There's beer in Egypt, and the beer is dyed red, apparently, for some reason. It says it's fertility, part of the fertility ceremony at the start of spring, I think it is. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's the fertility ceremony when the spring comes. Yeah, I think it is. And so there's beer that's dyed red. Well, she drinks too much of it and she goes pretty wild, because she's still pretty wild. She's only just come out of a terrible mother stage. And that beer, that red flowing beer, is another image of the blood elevator. It's the beer flowing, the red dyed beer. So it's not just the blood, but it is about the fertility, and it's about the blood. It's also about the fertility of the female, the great mother, which is obviously the cycles and the menstrual blood was of the great goddess, the great mother, and the terrible mother. The terrible mother, it becomes blood that's of rage. But in the great mother, it's the fertility. It's the creation, because the great mother is the goddess of creation. Obviously, she's the void. She's where creation comes out of. But the void is also terrible and scary. So it has both sides to it. But everything comes out of that. So anyway, the next one. Okay, that's too many, I think. No, back. It's very hard to see it on the keyboard, but I'll try. Okay. Nope. Nope. Back. Back. Okay. So the zeitgeist. This is a quick quote by Carl Jung, because, as I say, he developed his depth psychology out of all of this. And no secret about that. So he says about the Earth Mother is always chthonic and is occasionally related to the moon. It's always related to the moon, actually, either through the blood sacrifice already mentioned, or else because she's adorned with a sickle moon. He says that the mother is dark, deepening to black or red, these being her principal colors, and with a primitive or animal expression of face. In form, she not infrequently resembles Neolithic ideal of the Venus. Anyways, he goes on, the Earth Mother plays an important part in the woman's unconscious. For all her manifestations are described as powerful. This shows that in such cases, the Earth Mother element in the conscious mind is, well, he says, abnormally weak. That's a bit, and requires strengthening. Okay, we won't go there. Yeah, it's a bit misogynistic. But anyway, he goes on. You have to ignore those bits. The human figures are father and son, mother and daughter, king and queen, god and goddess. The symbols are the dragon, snake, elephant, lion, bear, and other powerful animals. And again, the spider, crab, butterfly, beetle, worm, etc. plant symbols. It goes on about, it's all nature, you know, the lotus, obviously, the rose. But he says about the Zeitgeist here, and the Zeitgeist is the German word, you know, for the spirit of the age. And it says here, so he makes this quote about the spirit of the age. I don't know if I can find it, so never mind. It says it here. Anyway, he says about this quote, and he calls it the spirit of the age, the time spirit. And so that is what the Great Wheel is all about, the spirit of the age. But in the case of the terrible mother, the Dionysian wine is spilt, and that's the blood elevator, and that's when it is. So Geist also means a wind, so it also means aghast, ghastly, and there's the Dionysian mask, and you know, Danny with his mouth open, but that's also the void as well. So it all sort of links in to the spirit of the age. It also, all these things, these layers of metaphor, give you the meaning of everything, which is wonderful. Okay, so go to the next. Okay, so this is in the games room, as I said. And behind Danny, there's, and I have said that before, there's the Colorado flag with, that is the horseshoe shape, the red horseshoe, which is the shape of the Tayet, which is also called the blood of Isis. And that's the symbol of the void, but also the womb of creation, the great mother. But again, she's also the terrible mother of destruction. She gives and she takes away. Next to the Ankh, which is, and the Ankh obviously is the Tayet, but it's also on the cross, and it's and the Jed is up the middle, so that's the meridian and obviously the horizon of the cross, and it's wonderful. And you can see the Jed in the middle of the Ankh. So, and that centroversion I was talking about is that bullseye. So the aim again, and you can see in the flag, you've got the sun in the middle, and there's the white line is like the Jed column. So the aim of raising the Jed is for centroversion, which is the center, the sun. But it is the sun combined with the moon. It's not the sun alone. Consciousness is the two together. The inner sun, which is the solar eclipse, which is the new moon, which leads to the full moon of consciousness. So, okay, I think I'm nearly done here. Okay, that's back. Okay, so that's you know, that's Nut, the sky goddess, and again that's with the void, which is not the void. I mean, as I say, they realized and they believed, and possibly they knew, because there's some very deep knowledge here, that the cosmos is a wonderful system and it is not truly a void. It was wonderful in 2000: A Space Odyssey how he conveyed the fear of the void, but also he put the mythology in to show that the void is conscious. And Osiris was in that. That's what that whole film is about, as I said. In fact, Hal in that, which is the Gnostic name, which I said before, for imitation, shows how consciousness was which was by the algorithms, because it's all based mathematically. The universe is mathematical, the cosmos is mathematical, everything is mathematical. And how you can program a computer, use this analogy, mathematically, but the algorithms would give a type of consciousness, but it wouldn't make the computer conscious. However, the danger was, without that ability to recognize the shadow and the higher spiritual consciousness, that there was a danger without that ability to balance and to recognize the need to raise the consciousness, and to recognize, as I said, the shadow that had to be raised again, not just assume you just raise consciousness, which is, again, that's the new age thing, which you cannot get rid of the shadow. And that's what they were cautioning against. You must acknowledge the shadow, and you must always be aware of it. And you can never dismiss it and say, I've raised above that and that's fine, I've done that, because it is a cycle, because it's the sun and the moon, and it's a constant awareness. Well, in the computer, the computer obviously was just algorithms, but he had a type of consciousness. But what happened? He got taken over by the terrible father and the terrible mother. And that crept in, because without consciousness, we are subject to that. And it showed the computer very cleverly becoming the terrible father and the terrible mother. And it was Dave Bowman, who was the Sagittarian centaur, chironic character, who then was shown as Osiris at the end, who unplugged the computer. He disconnected it, even though that would mean his death. But he was raising his consciousness in that way. He's saying, otherwise the whole world could be destroyed. That it was evil had to be destroyed. The computer had become evil because it had no consciousness and no capability of it. Just the bad things, that humanity suffers from: greed, jealousy, power hunger, narcissism. And so Dave Bowman disconnected. At that point, obviously, he's going to die, but he isn't going to die. He's going to be resurrected as Osiris, Horus, and the divine child, which is at the end, which is the baby, is Horus. And it shows Horus against the earth, and the earth is Isis. And that's the new age, that's the new age beginning, after the death of the old age, which in this case is Pisces. So that's what that means. Okay, so that's Apep again, which is the serpent. It's Draco, which is at the base of the pole, and the constellation is actually at the base. And so they saw the snake Draco as the axis, but the dangerous axis that could actually was the structure of the world, but actually could destroy, as I said, through the cycles. And so the hero's journey, the hero's task is to defeat the dragon. That's the night sea journey. That's the conquest of the dragon, which is the serpent that is evil, as opposed to the serpent that is the Jed column, which is the spine, which goes the Kundalini, the consciousness raised. It's a wonderful system that was lost during the age of Pisces, and actually Kubrick does go into that in the rest of the film, and so we'll go into that at a later date. But that's because it was the terrible father. It's the age of the the negative patriarchy. So what do you expect? Okay, so how do we get to this? Okay, that's the start. Must be this end. Get to the end. Be relieved. So long. Okay, so the centaurs. So next time, the other half of the terrible mother, is to show through the centaurs, and Melanie Reinhardt does some wonderful work on that. And so I've gone by her books a lot. And that's the myth of the spilling of the wine of Dionysus, which is the same thing. It is the spilling, and it's mirroring the tilt. It's the chaos that happens when the ancient wisdom is spilled, that shouldn't be spilled, that should be kept and treasured as sacred. And it's the lower consciousness that have got hold of the centaurs. Right, so And the last one. So that's Hercules, who has convinced Pholus, the senator, to pour the wine. And so I'll talk about that next time, because it's the same premise as the terrible mother. The wine is spilled. And I'm going to show some charts, because there's actually a stunning, because to bring it home in the individual, to use some astrological charts of a real event, actually, that shows the centaurs amazingly, because now I think we have quite a few centaurs we've discovered, and only since 1977 was the first one, Chiron, and then after that, in the 90s, we've got Chiron, we've got obviously Pholus, we've got actually I've got a book here. So Chiron, Pholus, Nessus, obviously, he's central to the myth. And there's another, actually, Chariclo, which is the wife of Chiron. And there's also another, which I've started using now since I did these charts, and I'll present them next time. And that's Upsulus. So anyway, so that's that for now. I've probably gone over time, have I?
You're fine, Michaela.
Yeah.
And you know, I am in awe of what what you're presenting. And I want to add a little bit of asteroid goddesses to what you're talking about.
Right.
In that, or just asteroids. In that, Isis and Osiris, I did a little bit of research on them a few years ago, and I realized that they meet up periodically in Aquarius and Leo.
Oh, wow. Really?
They never get very far from one another, but one will go out ahead and then the other one will catch up.
Goodness. Wow.
And they alternate, every other time, one time they'll meet in Aquarius and then the next time they'll meet in Leo.
Goodness.
And this is recently, I don't know, who knows, how long it's been going
all
on.
this is coming out, isn't it? It's like we're discovering all of this just at the time when, it's meant to be known. But so when are they together?
Well, they were together at the very beginning of 2021.
Right.
In Aquarius. And then let's see, and then in Leo, in July of this year.
Really?
Or wait, no, sorry, September of this year. I'm looking at the true node ephemeris.
Okay.
Which, gives you a printout of them. Okay, so it looks like about September. I've got once a month, the listings for once a month, but it looks like it's toward the end of September is when they meet.
Right.
In Leo, and then in Aquarius in December of 2024.
Wow, really? Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe bring that up at the on the panel. That would be great.
Yeah. And then there's another thing that I also looked to see where everybody was now. And Isis and Osiris are both in Virgo, as is Dionysus.
Wow.
And Horus and Hathor are conjunct in Libra.
No, really? Wow.
Yeah, around 6 degrees of Libra.
6 degrees. Goodness.
And then what was the other one that I was, let's see. Oh, there was another one. Oh, and then there's actually an asteroid Beer.
Oh, really?
I love
Beer.
Beer, yes. Which I had taken off to add in one of them, and then when you talked about it, I added it back
Oh,
in.
yeah, get that back in there.
Yeah, it's at the end of Aries, just past a conjunction with
Wow.
Eris.
Oh, oh, that's
And
weird, isn't it?
yeah, and let's see,
Fantastic.
there was a couple more that you mentioned, but I don't remember. Oh, Chericlo is in Aquarius, and the thing about her is that she holds space. So she's holding space in Aquarius. I love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we
Fantastic.
need that.
Yeah, definitely. That's fantastic, isn't it?
Exactly. Well,
Brilliant.
thank you so much. This was, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm in awe of how you can, you know, keep all these facts and interesting things, and bring them all up.
Well, it's only because it is a process that actually that's what the alchemists were talking about. It's the opus, it's the process of following the thread, and that's alchemy. And if you do the work, which is said in the film, all work and no play, that's what that's about, the opus magnus, alchemy. If you do the work and follow the thread and take and follow each thing, it does layer after layer, and that way your mind actually starts to link it all up.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Just like interpreting a chart.
Yeah. And then, as Jung was saying, what happens when it links it all up, then you recognize synchronicity. So it adds, then your intuition starts going, and that's what the great work is. So unwittingly, I was, following Kubrick's lead, which is what he was saying. Okay, you follow this fugue, this thread, this golden thread through the labyrinth, and that's the opus magnus, and that's following the hermetical teachings, and that's what astrology does. It makes us connect. And that's the beauty, because once our mind connects, it remembers, because it's made all these connections and they build up and up and up. And so you remember, because it's like, oh, yes, that's that. It's incredible. So,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, we're very lucky to be astrologers, I think, particularly right now.
I hear you. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to the next installment.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that is it's I won't go into it now, obviously, but it's a stunning story, which is a real story, and the charts and the centaurs, how they link into it, is quite amazing. But it is chilling, because it is about the terrible mother, the unconscious, and what it can do if it's let loose. And so I'll look forward to presenting that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much. See you next
time.
Thanks,
Robin. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Michaela.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.